you again for your lovely voice,
Oh,
adding to our experience. Really.
my pleasure. Oh, stop, stop,
My
stop.
grandson's two favorite colors. I wish Kevin were here today. He'd be
He's
loving the
teasing
black
me.
and the
He's
red.
teasing me.
Oh,
I'm just echoing what Susan
Yeah, I
said.
know. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I'm coming last time.
Well, do you want to make it bigger?
No, no, I'm not.
You can. I mean, you
No,
can
no,
go
no.
lower.
I know it's 9%, and then the fuzziness is just 10%. I'm used to.
That is reasonably reassuring.
As long as you know 90.
Yeah.
So
I will wear my.
just don't sing on the parts you don't know.
No, don't. I will wear my glasses for the Torah.
But you can go get your glasses. We're not starting it. Starting in a few minutes.
All right, let's see.
He just texted me.
Changing that in the places where, like yesterday,
Right.
instead of the tshuva tefillah, that you're going to go.
Exactly. I told her. I reminded. I said the
Good.
same thing.
And I don't think there was.
Like I said, there's a little bit of spontaneity.
Yes. That's sort of.
Finally got pants for my kids. I'm so excited. I'll have to close my underwear.
Oh, I'm excited.
Yeah. I'm very excited.
Yeah, I've been told.
Because lots of people, a lot of parents, it's like true. Or was I writing or something?
No, that wasn't you.
Or was I? it anyway. Blessed is the giver blessing. Blessed is this moment now. Blessed is this moment now, and every now to come. Blessed is the blessed one. Blessed is the giver. Blessed is the giver of blessed is this moment. Blessed is this moment, and every now, and every now to come all of you, come all of us, and bless the one who blesses. Come all of you, come all of us, and bless the one who blesses. Blessed is the blessed one. Blessed is the giver of blessing. Blessed is this moment now, and every now. Do 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 do
Shana Tova. There's something about that second day. If we did a survey as you were leaving and we asked the question, what is your religious upbringing? And let us do a raise of hands, just because we can do this. So if you grew up in a conservative/Orthodox home, would you raise your hand, please? Okay, well, that pretty much just proves something I've always wondered but never actually asked. And there's something about the notion of if you were raised in that kind of environment, the thing you would have to ask yourself is, well, what would I do on the second day of Rosh Hashanah? Would I no longer go? And a lot of our friends who grew up as we did do not. But there's a notion of this second day being a place where we can just breathe and not have to rush during the service, not to rush after the service, out to the car, worry about getting to the next place. It's just a day to reflect on what we're doing and where we've been and what this year can mean to us. The truth is that Rosh Hashanah is not really a time for thinking about that which was. Rosh Hashanah is really about projecting ourselves into an ideal future. Of course, we can't build that future out there because we don't know anything about what the next hour will look like. Or I mean, if you start studying time with physicists who write about it, then I will warn you, if you ever do that, it will just mess you up so badly, because the truth is, really, not only from one moment to the next is utterly one way and utterly unpredictable, but then if you add to that the notion in quantum physics that in every moment is every conceivable alternative to the moment you're living. So you could say yes in one life and no in the next, and maybe in the third, and they're all you, and they're all living side by side in every ticking moment. And then you wonder, because you start studying this stuff, you start to wonder, is it possible, because we've seen it in sci-fi movies, can you bump into yourself? Can you bump into the one that said no when you said yes? Anyway, I digress. But the point is that Rosh Hashanah is about thinking openly and magnificently and garnering as much hope as we can possibly harvest, even when there's no good reason to hope. Because it is that is the fuel that moves us from one moment to the next with something other than the fear of what that next moment will bring. I don't know how to find that. I don't have exact path guidance to that. But I do know that we as human beings have that ability to reach sometimes as deeply as we can possibly reach, to find the moment to say, there's something beyond this. Yehuda Amichai, the great Israeli poet, Robert Frost of modern Hebrew poetry, wrote a book of poetry, and the name of it was Me'acharei kol zeh mistater osher gadol. Beyond all that hides a great fulfillment. And I love that title because I think that's what we look towards, to pray for, and to provide for each other. Speaking of praying with and for each other, if you are wearing a talit this morning, if you would rise for this blessing that we do as we put on our talesim together. I always think of the wings of the Shekhinah as the tzitzis go flying in the air, and you feel it and see it from all the people sitting around you. And so we ask God to bless us on this second day of a new year with health, with the potential for happiness, and for the ability to hope. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehitatef batzitzit. On page 110.
Ma tovu, oh
Ma
lecha Yaakov,
Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael. Ma tovu Adonai, the soul that you've given us, this neshama, this unique spark that every one of us contains in our hearts, this spark lights our way from the center of our soul out into the world. And we give thanks for your presence in every fiber of our being.
Elohai, Elohai,
122.
Nishama. Elohai, Elohai, Nishama. Shenatata bi Tehorahi, Tehorahi. Ata, Virata, Ata, Yitzarta, Ata, Nefachta, Nefachta bi. Elohai, Elohai, Nishama. Elohai, Elohai, Nishama. Shenatata bi Tehorahi, Tehorahi. Oh God, the soul you have given me is yours. You made me, you shaped me, you breathed me into life. Elohai, Elohai, Nishama. Elohai, Elohai, Nishama. Shenatata bi Tehorahi, Tehorahi. Elohai, Elohai, Nishama.
I forgot to do something very important, particularly with this gathering, this 93% gathering of conservative Yehudim. One of the things that we do on Friday nights classically is we ask people to rise and because you don't necessarily know each other. Some of you at all, some of you a couple times a year. I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, to please rise. And if you will merge as you are able and merge to the middle and just look across the aisle at someone you don't think you know, or maybe you know they want to give them a hug. Either way, if you would cross the aisle, which isn't happening much in our world, and just say, Good Yantif, Shana Tova. Comfortable? Okay. Such a great feeling. Okay, so where? Yeah. I know. I mean, anyway, we're going right to the bar. Okay, we have the rest of the service to get to. This is always dangerous, I understand. And since you're standing up, don't bother sitting down because we're going to the Baruch Hu, which we'll get to in just a minute.
You've lost control.
Every once in a while, a guy just loses control.
Just give him a.
Oh, now I realize why I do this at the very beginning. Yeah. Ah, there's the cue. There's the cue. So if everyone would, conservative Jews, I should have known. You see, that's it. They talk during the service. Is that okay? All right. Shh. And we're live.
Hi, everybody up there.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed. We read together in the middle of page 142. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Yotzer Or Uvarei Choshech Osei Shalom Uvarei Et HaKol Ha'ma'ir La'aretz V'Ladarim Aleha Berachamim Uvtuvo Mechadesh B'chol Yom Tamid Ma'aseh V'Reishit Ma Rabu Ma'asecha Adonai Kulam B'chokhma Asita Al Ha'aretz Kinyanecha Titbarach Adonai Eloheinu Al Shevach Ma'aseh Yadecha Val Me'orei Or She'asita Yifa'arucha Sela Or Chadash Al Tzion Ta'ir V'nizkei Chulanu Meheira Le'oro.
Baruch atah Adonai
Baruch Shemo.
Yotzer HaMe'orah.
Amen. Page 146.
Ahavai Rabbah, Ahavtadu, Adonai Eloheinu, Ahavai Rabbah, Ahavtadu. Adonai Eloheinu, Chemla Gedola V'Tera, Chamalta Aleinu, Chemla Gedola V'Tera, Chamalta Aleinu. Ava Rabbah, Avtanu, Adonai Eloheinu, Baruch atah Adonai Haboher be'amo Yisrael be'ahava.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
Baruch Shem Od Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed.
Please be seated. 152.
V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha
b'chol levacho v'chol nafshecha v'chol me'adecha v'hayu ha'devarim ha'ele asher anochi metzavcha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta b'ham v'shivtecha b'veitecha uvlechtecha v'derech uv'shochbecha uv'kumecha ukshartam leot ayadecha והיו לטוטפות בעיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. When you're plowing your way through whatever it is, your chosen profession, for some of us, it has required, and I'm looking at the doctors in the congregation particularly, but there are a variety of other professions where this is the case, where you're the low person on the totem pole. So if you think you're getting off for the high holy days, it doesn't matter how devout you claim yourself to be. If you're on call and no one's going to trade your shift, then guess what? You're there. And maybe you get to a point, God willing, in your career where you can say, I'm going to be gone, you take my place. But not when you're like in the first year, that maybe not even the third year, maybe by the fourth year, when you're in training. So my children used to be they would come to the second day, but now they're adults, and ironically, they're not coming to services because of their obligations in their various fields and graduate school responsibilities. So I have a daughter who lives in New Jersey. She's going to Rutgers in the psychology program, the graduate program, and so she has certain obligations as a low person on that totem pole. She has to show up. And so she was biking to her internship this morning. She lives in a neighborhood, which she didn't know when she moved in, that is heavily Orthodox. And she said, so there she was getting on her bike, and she was walking hundreds of Jews walking to their various shuls. And she said, I felt, unfortunately she didn't feel guilty, but no, she was too liberal, I guess. But anyway, so she said, I felt like I should say Shana Tova or Good Yantif, but I thought that maybe they would look at me and they would give me the evil eye, like, yeah, Good Yantif to you too, breaking every rule of the Jewish tradition. And I thought, it made me really sad. I thought, all these ways that we've partitioned ourselves, all the ways that we have pointed at who is what and who is not, all she wanted to do was to share a particular love for this moment. And yes, she had to work. Oh well. And it could very well be that, God forbid, one of their children or one of them might end up having to be in the emergency room, and someone like her or someone like my son would have to, or would have to be there because they have to, and they would be there to take care. And we're kind of there to take care of each other all the time, it seems to me. Like no matter what your role is, we're there to take care of each other. And again, it's not an expectation. I don't even know how to begin working for it because I don't think it's particularly possible at this moment in our history. Nonetheless, looping back to my thoughts of the beginning of our service, I have this deep hope that one day it really might be okay for a non-practicing Jew to pass a Satmar Chassid on the street, and the Satmar Chassid is on the way to the synagogue, and the non-observant Jew is on her way to breakfast, that they can still pass and understand that the greeting of Shana Tova, Good Yantif, brings us together in a transcendent and simple way. And though I don't pretend I can speak for God, I'm going to go out on a limb here and suggest that it might just be that God would prefer that we don't look away from each other, but instead we look towards each other and wish for a good new year. That's my hope. On page 164.
Mi kamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, Nora tehilot osef veleh, shira chadasha, shibechu ge'ulim lishimchat al sfat hayam, יחד כולם הודובים לכו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. צור ישראל קומה בעזרת ישראל ובתחינו מך יהודה וישראל גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו קדוש ישראל ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל. On page 166, we rise for the tefillah. La 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 ya la 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 la. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei Avoteinu ve'Imoteinu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el HaGadol HaGibor VaHanara Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim V'Konei HaKol V'Zocher Chastei Avot V'Imahot ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. זוכרנו לחיים, מלך חפץ בחיים, וכותבנו בספר החיים, למענך אלוהים חיים. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם בעזרת שרה.
אמן.
אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע, מוריד הטל. מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו בשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה. מי כמוך אל הרחמים, זוכה צורף לחיים, ברחמים ונאמנתה לחיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי הכל.
אמן.
ונתן את תוקף קדושת היום, כי הוא נורא והיום, ובו תינשא מלכותך, ויכון בחסד כיסאך, ותשב עליו באמת.
Page 178.
בראש השנה יכתבון, יכתבון,
יום צום
כיפור יכתבון, יכתבון.
כמה יעבורון וכמה יברעון, מי יחיה ומי ימות, מי וקיצו ומי לא וקיצו.
בראש השנה יכתבון, יכתבון,
וביום צום
כיפור
יכתבון,
יכתבון.
מי באש ומי במים, מי בחרב ומי בחיה, מי ברעב ומי בצמא. בראש השנה יכתבון, יכתבון, וביום צום כיפור יכתבון, יכתבון. מי ברש ומי במגפה, מי וחניקה ומי ושכילה, מי ינוח ומי ינוע, מי ישקיט ומי יטורף. בראש השנה ייכתבון, ייכתבון, וביום צום כיפור ייכתבון, ייכתבון. מי ישקיט ומי יטורף, מי ישלב ומי יתייסר, מי יעני ומי יעשיר, מי יושפל ומי ירום. בראש השנה ייכתבון, ייכתבון, וביום צום כיפור ייכתבון, We read together at the bottom of page 178. On Rosh Hashanah, this is written. On the fast of Yom Kippur, this is sealed. How many will pass away from this world? How many will be born into it? Who will live and who will die? Who will reach the ripeness of age? Who will be taken before their time? Who by fire and who by water? Who by war and who by beast? Who by famine and who by drought? Who by earthquake and who by plague? Who by strangling and who by stoning? Who will rest and who will wander? Who will be tranquil and who will be troubled? Who will be calm and who tormented? Who will live in poverty and who in prosperity? Who will be humbled and who exalted?
Utshuva, utfilah, utsedaka, ma'avirin et roah hagezerah.
192.
Nikadesh et shimcha ba'olam.
184, sorry.
Kishem shemakdishim otobi shmei marom kakatuv ayan v'viecha v'kara zeh el zeh v'amar Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh Adonai Tzevaot Meloch ol haaretz kevodo. Adir, Adirenu Adonai, Adonenu Madir, Shimcha b'chol haaretz.
Baruch kevod Adonai mimkomo.
Echadu Eloheinu, Hu Avinu Malkeinu, Hu Moshiachenu v'Hu Yashmienu, Berachamav le'nei kol chai. Ani Adonai Elohechem,
Yimloch Adonai leolam, Elohayich Zion, ledor vador. Alleluia.
Lidor vador nagid God lecha, ulenitzach nitzachim kiddush atcha nagdish, v'shivchacha Eloheinu mipiru lo yamush leolam vaed. Ki el melech gadol ukadosh atah, Baruch atah Adonai hamelech hakadosh.
on 197. I read this yesterday, and I love it so much I want to read it again. Remembered for Life by Pablo Neruda. Now we will count to 12, and we will all keep still. For once on the face of the earth, let's not speak in any language. Let's stop for 1 second and not move our arms around so much. It would be an exotic moment without rush, without engines. We would all be together in a sudden strangeness. Fishermen in the cold sea would not harm whales, and the man gathering salt would look at his hurt hands. Those who prepare green wars, wars with gas, wars with fire, victories with no survivors, would put on clean clothes and walk about with their brothers in the shade, doing nothing. What I want should not be confused with total inactivity. Life is what it is about. I want no truck with death. If we were not so single-minded about keeping our lives moving and for once could do nothing, perhaps a huge silence might interrupt this sadness of never understanding ourselves and of threatening ourselves with death. Perhaps the earth can teach us as when everything seems dead and later proves to be alive. Now I'll count up to 12, and you keep quiet, and I will go. Please be seated. We pray silently.
Page 216, Sim Shalom. This is a very simple melody for Sim Shalom that I often sing, and I just love it because I feel like it is what the words say. Sim Shalom, and right below it says, let there be peace. We just keep repeating, Sim Shalom. And I feel that this particular melody just has like a pleading feel. We can sing it soft. We can really mean it in our hearts, or we can really sing it out. And we can say, come on, let's have peace. Sim, 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 shalom, sim, 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 shalom, sim, 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 shalom, tova uveracha. Sim, 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 shalom, sim, 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 shalom, sim, 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 shalom, tova uveracha. Ya la 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 ya la la. Ya la 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 ya la. Ya la 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 ya la. Ya la. Sim, 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 shalom, sim, 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 shalom, sim, 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 shalom, tova uveracha.
It's a little sad that I have to preface the next prayer by suggesting that it is not political. And I will just leave that there as we now continue on page 272, and we read together a prayer for our country. God of holiness, we hear your message. Justice, justice, you shall pursue. God of freedom, we hear your charge. Proclaim liberty throughout the land. Inspire us through your teachings and commandments to love and uphold our precious democracy. Let every citizen take responsibility for the rights and freedoms we cherish. Let each of us be an advocate for justice, an activist for liberty, a defender of dignity. And let us champion the values that make our nation a haven for the persecuted, a beacon of hope among the nations. May our actions reflect compassion for all people within our borders and abroad. May our leaders and officials embody the vision of our founders to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. We pray for courage and conscience as we aim to support our country's highest values and aspirations, the hard-won rights that define us as a people, the responsibilities that they entail. We pray for all who serve our country with selfless devotion in peace and in war, from fields of battle to clinics and classrooms, from government to the grassroots, all those whose noble deeds and sacrifice benefit our nation and our world. We are grateful for the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness that our founders ascribed to you, our Creator. We pray for their wisdom and moral strength, that we may be guardians of these rights for ourselves and for the sake of all people, now and forever, and we all say, Amen. If you would please turn to page 224 and rise. We read together. Avinu Malkeinu, we stand in awe, we draw close in love. Avinu Malkeinu, the power that passes through us and pervades all things. Avinu Malkeinu, the divine that is present within and among us. Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Kolenu, we speak this sacred truth aloud. Avinu Malkeinu, Chatanu Lifanecha, we stand as one, accountable for our sins. Avinu Malkeinu, Chamol Aleinu, Vi'al Olaleinu, Vitapenu. We yearn for true compassion for our children most of all. Avinu Malkeinu, Kalei Dever V'chera V'ra'av Me Aleinu. May we resist the ravages of illness, fear, and despair. Avinu Malkeinu, Kalei Kol Tsar Umastin Me Aleinu. Let us summon courage to withstand our enemies. Avinu Malkeinu, Kotvenu B'Sefer Chayim Tovim. Let the goodness of this gift of life be engraved upon our hearts. Avinu Malkeinu, Chadesh Aleinu Shana Tova. May we taste anew the sweetness of each day. Avinu Malkeinu, Malei Yadena B'Birchotecha. Let us wake up to the blessings already in our grasp. Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu Va'anenu, Ki Ein Banu Ma'asim. Aseh Imanu Tzedakah V'Chesed V'Hoshienu. However small our deeds, let us see their power to heal. May we save lives through compassion, generosity, and justice. Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, We're faced with an interesting ritual decision. What follows is the Torah Service, and as we've done forever here and in every other synagogue, probably for at least 2,000 years, if not more, was that we would open the ark and take out a Torah, or all the Torahs, and we would take one of those, open it up, and read from it, which we're going to do. But we decided a few years ago, we got a directive from the Westminster Synagogue organization that was responsible for gathering all the Sifrei Torah scrolls that were taken by the Nazis to be used as a memorial to the Jewish people who were going to be wiped out. It was this extraordinarily warped sense that it would be a victory for the Nazis to have a museum to show all that they stole. And one of the things that they wanted to show were thousands of Torah scrolls. When that warehouse was found, the Westminster Synagogue in London was faced with this tremendous task. They were given the task by the Allies, and that was, what do you do with all of these scrolls? Who takes care of them? Who's going to go over to see if they're kosher, if they've been damaged? So there was a remarkable effort, really an international effort, and it was decided that the best way to ensure that they be treated with respect would be to send them to synagogues that requested them. And synagogues all over the world asked to be the guardian of one of those. In our temple, Bernie Julius, may he rest in peace, was one of those people who took upon his shoulders the responsibility, working with Rabbi Miller of blessed memory, to get one of those Sifrei Torah. For years, as you know, it lived out in the hall, at the end of the hall. As one of the kids told me, that's where you would touch when you would race to the end of the hallway. That was goal. That was, that was the touch point. And I thought, well, that's cute. Yeah, not exactly what we had in mind, probably. And then, as we began the reformation, the renovation of our sanctuary, we thought, wouldn't it be nice to bring that Sefer Torah into the sanctuary? Not to mention that when we got this directive from Westminster a few years ago, they said, for years we've said just keep it in a display case, keep it nicely protected as an artifact. And then a new management came on and they said, if you don't regularly roll parchment, it will literally start to disintegrate. Ironically, the more you use it, the more it lives, which, lahavdil, God forbid you should, if you have a great leather jacket, the more you wear it, well, parchment is essentially a form of leather, and the more you use it, the softer and more resilient it becomes. So we used it, I think 2 years ago was the first time, and we've decided ever since then, on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, we will read Bereshit, the story of creation, from that Torah scroll. Now, technically, if you look at it, and some of the writing eroded a bit, okay, so it's not officially maybe kosher, but by us it's kosher enough. It's like, again, my loving conservative-born members of the congregation, just like you had Chinese food plates in the back. It's kosher enough. And so then the question was, well, so for the second day of Rosh Hashanah, where do we take it out of there and put it in this ark? Because that's not really technically an ark. But then I thought, well, an ark the word in Hebrew for ark is tevat, which just means a box. The same word, by the way, for a mailbox, and also the same word for the cradle that Moses is put in when he's sent off into the Nile River. So I thought, you know what? That back there, it's not just a case. At least maybe for always, that's going to be another ark that houses a living Torah, a Torah that gives us blessing and gives us this thing that we're hoping for, which is hope. So we're going to continue our Torah. So sort of just direct everybody, kind of turn and face in this approximate direction as we, and this is another thing you'll see. Some of you won't even know this because few people do. This Torah table actually has a way to raise the Torah table surface so that people can get closer to the Torah when they're reading it. And I've been told by some people that they're at a stage where that would be really nice to see the text, or maybe they're not tall enough. Whatever the case, the table works in mysterious ways. But before we do the Torah table, let's take the Torah from the ark. So that is on page 227.
Kamocha Elohim Adonai, v'ein kama'asecha, malchutecha malchut, kol olamim, u'memshaltecha bechol dor v'dor. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai imloch, le'olam va'ed, Adonai oz le'mo yitein, Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom. Avarachamim heitiv avirtzonecha et Zion. Tifnei chomot Yerushalayim, Tifnei chomot Yerushalayim. Kivecha levad batachnu, melech elram v'nisa, Adon olamim. On page 228, we read together, Adonai, Adonai, God, compassionate, gracious, endlessly patient, loving, and true, showing mercy to the 1,000th generation, forgiving evil, defiance, and wrongdoing, granting pardon. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'Chanun Adonai, 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 El Rachum v'Chanun Adonai, Erech
Ki thanks, Ash. Tetzei Torah Ki mitzion Tetzei Torah Udevar Adonai Mirushalayim Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Le'amo Yisrael B'kedushato Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh v'norah Shemo Gadlul Adonai iti Uneromema Shemo Yachdav
Lecha Adonai Agedu.
Torah readers, would you come and get to the table, please? V'hanetzach v'hahod Ki chol b'shamayim u'ba'aretz Ki chol b'shamayim
Uvaretz Lecha
Adonai hamamlacha V'amid na'aseh lechol lerosh
Yismechu hashamayim Yismechu hashamayim Yismechu hashamayim V'tagel haaretz Yismechu hashamayim I'm going to also Shabbos Yismechu hashamayim Yismechu hashamayim V'tagel haaretz Al shlosha divarim
Shinata. I'm here, you know, second day. we
Shlosha
got time.
divarim
Just running.
Olam omed Al shlosha divarim Al shlosha divarim Al shlosha divarim Olam omed Al haTorah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al gmilut chasadim Al haTorah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al gmilut chasadim.
So, I just want to say, for 22 years, we've carried this Torah down this aisle on Yizkor. And it's been such a dark and sad moment. And I have to say, just now, walking with this Torah, I actually don't have the words yet. Just saying. Just to be honest. Ta-da! Please be seated. Don't get too comfortable because in a moment we're inviting the entire congregation for this Aliyah. First, just to say that, to think about, again, not as a memorial, but instead of thinking of the people who have had the honor to read from Torah. We think this scroll, at least when we had it looked at by the group of people that also helped make the Torah that we commissioned possible, he said based on the formation of the letters and on the approximate age of he wasn't doing carbon dating, but based on the approximate guesstimate of the parchment, he figures it's probably about 120 years old. And that we have it and that we now read from it is just a tiny metaphor for what we as Jews have always done, which is take the things that are most important and hold them close. We are so honored to have these remarkable Torah readers, each who will take a day of the week of creation. And of course, we can't invite them to chant their portion without first blessing the Torah, which we will do now. So if everyone would please rise, and we invite you to get as close as you can. Just look out for your guitar. And where did my book go? Was it? Oh, thanks. Oh, thank you. And for those of you who are going to follow along, the Torah portion itself is on page 330. There's been a lot of debate about what to read on the second day of Rosh Hashanah because, again, those of you born and raised know that on the second day of Rosh Hashanah in a traditional synagogue, that's when the Akedat Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac, is read. But it was considered in the Reformed tradition that it was going to be only one day and that we should take the more significant of the two Torah portions and read that on the first day. Only the question is, then what do you do in a Reformed congregation like ours that celebrates 2 days of the new year? And the Reform movement decided, okay, so why not just read the story of creation? That makes more sense than anything on the birthday of the universe. But then clearly the editors, when they put our new machzor together, thought they wanted to hew a little closer to the tradition, but they didn't want to dispossess those of us who came to really love the fact that we read the story of creation. So they stuck in the back of the book. At least it's still there, and I really appreciate that. And as you are standing around it, if you would like, as the Torah is being chanted, to take a closer look at just how magnificent this Torah is and the unique calligraphy. If you've ever seen Torah calligraphy, you'll see that it's different. It's different in the shapes of some of the letters, and the beauty of the calligraphy is really quite unique. So we are fortunate to be together today on this New Year, fortunate to have each other, fortunate to have these Torah readers.
Just wanted to say, because it's so high, if you want to be able to see, there's a lot of room on the steps if you want to come around.
Yes, this is like behind, this is the bleacher seats, which end up being
So
better.
if you want to come by,
than the front seats.
mezzanine are always the good seats. I like
right.
those. Front of the mezzanine. So.
They're the Broadway person.
Yeah.
So come on up as you wish.
Thanks.
And now the Torah Blessing, which is on page 230. Everybody ready? Baruch hu et Adonai Amvorach, Baruch Adonai Amvorach leolam vaed, Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato, Baruch ata Adonai noten haTorah. Amen. Only one way to go. And there it is.
Bereshit barach Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz v'haaretz hayita tohu vavohu v'hoshe al pnei tehum v'ruach Elohim merapefet al pnei Vayomer Elohim Yehi Or Vihi Or Vera Elohim Et Haor Ki Tov Vidavel Elohim Ben Haor Uven HaChoshech Vikra Elohim Laor Yom V'Hoshet Kara Laila Vihi
Erev Vayvoker Yom Echad.
Vayomer Elohim Yihi Rakia Betoch HaMayim Vihi Mavdil Bein Mayim Lamayim Vayas Elohim Et HaRakia Vayavdel Bein HaMayim Asher Mitachat LaRakia Uvein HaMayim Asher me'al larakia vahichen vayikra Elohim larakia shamayim
Vayerev Vayvoker Yom Sheni.
Vayomer Elohim Yikavu Hamayim Mitahat Hashamayim El Makom Echad Vatera'e Hayabasha Vayichen Vayikra Elohim Layabasha Eretz Umikvei Hamayim Kara Hayamim Vayar Elohim Kitov Vayomer Elohim Tadshe Haaretz Deshe Esef Mazria Zera Eitz Peri Ohose Peri Leminoho Asher Zarovoho Al Haaretz Vayichen Vatotse Haaretz Deshe Esef Mazria Zera Leminehu Ve'et Sose Peri Asher Zarovo Leminehu Vayar Elohim Kitov
Vayerev Vayvoker Yom Shlishi.
Vayomer Elohim Yehi Me'orot Birkia Hashamayim Lehavdil Ben Hayom Uven Halayla V'hayu Leotot Umoadim Ulyamim V'shanim V'hayu le'morot birkia hashamayim le'ha'ir al ha'aretz vayichen vayas Elohim et shnei hamorot hagadolim et hamaor hagadol lemimshelet hayom ve'et hamaor hakaton lemimshelet halayla ve'et ha'kochavim vayiten otam Elohim birkia hashamayim leha'ir al ha'aretz v'limshol bayom uvalayla ulhavdil ben ha'or uben ha'choshech vayar Elohim kitov
Vayerev Vayvoker Yom Revi'i.
Vayomer Elohim Yitzra'u Hamayim Sheretz Nefesh Haya Va'ov Yofef Ala Aretz Al Pania Rakia Shamayim Vayivra Elohim Et Hatanaim Hagadolim Va'ed Kol Nefesh Hachaya Haromeshet Asher ירצו המים למיניהם, ואת קולו כנף למיניהו, וירא אלוהים כי טוב, וירא אותם אלוהים לאמור, פרעו רעבו, ומילאו את המים בימים, והעוף ירא בארץ,
ערב ויבוקר יום חמישי.
ויאמר אלוהים תוצאי הארץ נפש חיה למינה בהמה ורמס וחייתו ארץ למיניהו ויהי כן. ויעש אלוהים את חיות הארץ למינה ואת הבהמה למינה ואת חורמץ האדמה למיניהו וירא אלוהים כי טוב. ויאמר אלוהים נעשה אדם בצלמנו כדמותנו וירדו בדגת הים ובעוף השמיים ובבהמה ובכל הארץ ובכל הרומס על הארץ. ויברא אלוהים את האדם בצלמו בצלם אלוהים ברא אותו זכר ונקבה ברא אותם. ויברך אותם אלוהים ויאמר להם אלוהים פרו ורבו ומילאו את הארץ וכבשוה ורדו בדגת הים ובו השמיים וכל חיה הרומסת על הארץ. ויאמר אלוהים הנה נתתי לכם את כל עשב זורעי הזרע אשר על פני כל הארץ ואת כל העץ אשר בו פרי עץ זורעי הזרע לכם יהיה לאוכלה ולכל חיית הארץ ולכל עוף השמיים ולכל רומס על הארץ אשר בו נפש חיה את כל ירק עשב לאוכלה ויהי כן. וירא אלוהים את כל אשר עשה והנה טוב מאוד ויהי ערב
ויבוקר יום השישי. On the seventh day they rested.
ויחולו השמיים והארץ וכל צבאם ויכל אלוהים ביום השביעי מלאכתו אשר עשה וישבות ביום השביעי בכל מלאכתו אשר עשה ויברך אשר עשה ויברך אלוהים את יום השביעי וקדש אותו. I've lost my...
Take a deep breath.
From Vayivarach.
ויברך אלוהים את יום השביעי וקדש אותו כי בו שבת מכל מלאכתו אשר ברא
אלוהים לעשות. To the bravery and greatness of our Torah readers, Yesher Koach, 7 sisters. I will not be doing Hagbah with this Torah. I just want to tell you. I know, I'm just looking at it and commenting on things that are possible and the things that are not. Let's all bless the Torah together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai Notena Tov. Amen. Given the complexity that is still inherent in putting this Sefer Torah back in its ark, instead of putting it, feeling all of your eyes wondering, can he do it? Because I can, but it's going to take a little while. So rather than trying that, I'm going to ask Becky if you could grab me a tallis from the hall, and our Sefer Torah will join us for the rest of the service on the Torah table. And now what I'm going to do, though, is if you would sort of spot this Torah, and we're going to, I'll lower this table as we do. So just watch your fingers, everybody. And this will be the extent of our lifting the Torah and then dressing it. So let's do that part. V'zot Torah aser Moshe lifnei v'nei Yisrael al pi Adonai b'yad Moshe. Place it back on the table.
Right to Eitz Chaim He.
Eitz Chaim He lemachazikim ba v'tomcheha meushar tiracheha tarchei dam v'chol netivoteha shalom Ashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nachshuva Chadesh Chadesh Yameinu Chadesh Yameinu Yekedem. Please be seated. She prefers this to a handheld?
Yes.
For that?
Yes.
One of the most interesting things that we're able to learn about our congregation is all about the talents of the people in it. You know, we don't walk around, we're not all on LinkedIn, well, probably we are, but the idea of knowing just what people do when they're not davening in shul, when they're not reading from the Torah. And it is remarkable, the array of people and what they do. Extraordinary, extraordinary things. Creative people, people that work with their hands, people that work in the highest levels of technology, in the arts. I mean, it is a capacious, awe-inspiring list. And then you learn these things like, there are people that can really chant Torah, you know, and you just heard 7 of them, and it's such a machaya, such a blessing to be able to be present and learn these things about them, that they don't do it for a living at. They're not professional Torah readers, that they actually do other things. And today, we're really honored to learn more about one of those particular people. So one of those 7 sisters that chanted Torah was Hazel Siv, who you know, if you've just passed her just in the congregation, she has that really luscious South African accent. If you're an accent connoisseur, as am I, you know, between Australian and English and South African, some people go, oh, they all sound the same. No. There is something very round and very pleasing. Sometimes I am a professional insomniac, and frequently I would just think, I should just call it Hazel, have her read the yellow pages to me, and that would just calm me down. But not only does she have this great voice, not only is she a very, very accomplished scientist and a professor at MIT and at least a couple labs that I know of, and more that she probably, because she's a very humble person, didn't even include on her own list. But I know that her students are lucky people, and we're lucky that she's part of the congregation. And one of the ways that we're most lucky to know Hazel is that she's also become a really accomplished storyteller, and her stories have been inspiring to the women of the congregation who have chosen to go on the retreats that we've held. Hazel is captivating and really delighted. Over the years, we ask people from different points of their lives to speak to us about who and what they are, and Hazel is going to speak to us on the subject of, well, you'll hear what the subject is, but it has a lot to do with the idea of belonging and how one finds one's place and one's purpose in life. No small task, that. Where do you want to be? In that case, let me wire you for sound.
That was quite a build-up, Rabbi.
Well, that's how I feel. What can I tell you? Let me fiddling around here. There we go. And hold it. 1 second. Not perfect yet. Now you're on.
We'll drink far from the Torah.
Move this boom out of your way.
Oh, okay. Perfect. The last time Rabbi and I talked about this, I was in the world's worst traffic jam in Dar es Salaam, and I was sitting there literally, trying to get the plane home, and there's this text from a number, and I had to figure out who it was from, but the topic suggested it was Rabbi. And he got very nervous as I was in the world's worst traffic jam trying to get to Jomo Kenyatta Airport, Julius Nyerere Airport to get back home. It was nice to have company on the way. But when Rabbi asked me to speak today, I was pleased for two reasons. First, because I respect Rabbi, and so an invitation from him counts. But second, because the invitation showed that I somehow belong in this congregation. Not so long ago, I read the book Tribe on Homecoming and Belonging by the journalist Sebastian Junger. Junger proposes the interesting thesis that the sense of belonging is the most important way by which people judge their satisfaction with life. That is why people can sometimes feel more content when they're working together in times of hardship or war than when they are alone in times of plenty or peace. I was 22 when I arrived from South Africa to live in the United States. It was July, and it was in St. Louis, where the temperature was 104 with 100% humidity. My then husband and I had a lot of luggage, so we said yes when a porter offered to help. As we got to the cab, my husband tipped the porter. He looked at the money and then threw it at us. "Take your change," he scowled. "I'm so sorry," I called. "We're new here and don't know how much to tip." "I'm not your slave," he spat at me and walked off. We sat silently in the taxi, a bit shocked. I had never before met a black person who was not friendly, even in apartheid South Africa. The shock continued. The first Friday night we were in St. Louis, we went to some acquaintances for dinner. I went into the kitchen for a glass of water and did a double take to see two black maids in uniform. I could have been back in South Africa. I soon learned that black people in St. Louis did not seem to like white people. I knew little about slavery and civil rights, just that for the first time I was part of a white majority, and I felt way more uncomfortable than when I'd been a white minority in South Africa. There were such obvious inequities in St. Louis. The areas in which black people lived were much more modest than the white suburbs. Our apartment was on the edge of a poor area, and the national supermarket there carried produce that looked not so fresh. One day, by accident, I drove to another national supermarket in the smart area of Clayton. To my amazement, the produce there looked great, and the price was no higher than on Hanley Road, where we lived. Huh? Poor black people were not expected to know the difference? It was fine to sell them inferior food? But the thing was, people gave me a hard time about apartheid. With a superior air, almost everyone who found out I was from South Africa voiced opinions as to how terrible the apartheid regime was, how what South Africa needed was to follow the United States model of democracy and equality. Now, I was not exactly a fan of apartheid. It was a terribly unfair system. I had worked for the political opposition party, but I almost felt compelled to defend South Africa when attacked over and over. I almost said, hey, you have a lot of racial inequities here in St. Louis. Of course, that would have made things much worse. So I just mumbled how I was also against apartheid and tried to get away. St. Louis was not a good introduction to the United States. I definitely did not belong there. I grew up in Johannesburg, South Africa, Joburg for short, 10,000 miles away from St. Louis. I knew exactly where I belonged. I was Jewish, South African, and white. I grew up proud to be Jewish. I was proud that Jews had overcome persecution and done well. I was proud of the accomplishments of the Jews who had built Johannesburg. When they were teenagers, my grandfather Abraham and one of his brothers Sam came from Lithuania to somewhere safer with more opportunity. They had little education, but they were smart and ambitious. They teamed up with Herman Karnofsky, who had a university degree, and built a successful medicine distributor, Civ Brothers and Karnofsky. My grandparents had one of the first convertible cars in Joburg, and a lovely house on Parktown Ridge overlooking the city. I was brought up to be ashamed when any Jew did something bad. I still am. We were Orthodox, and as a girl, I could not study Hebrew or read Torah, but I loved going to shul, the great synagogue on Warmeren Street. The chief rabbi of South Africa presided there, and I was proud that our shul was so important. Even though I barely learned more than the Shema, I loved the prayers. I loved dressing smartly for services, and I loved seeing all those Jews together, where we belonged. Our extended family was pretty close. We were always at each other's houses, for the Jewish holidays, for afternoon tea. When we dressed up for Purim in costumes our grandma Lily had made her children, or when I needed my Auntie Rose to cut out a pattern for a dress I was sewing at school. We had our dramas, like the time my vivacious Auntie Vicky had too much to drink even before we started the Pesach Seder and had to lie down. And the rest of the evening was spent discussing Vicky's drinking problem, with the Seder completely forgotten. It was cozy, and I assumed we would live that way always. I was also South African. It was my country and the country of my ancestors, and I loved it. I loved the weather. It never rains enough in Joburg, and everyone always complains about that. But it's warm and sunny even in winter. I loved the veld, the grasslands. I loved the animals. Foreigners would ask us if lions walked down Elof Street in the center of Johannesburg. We laughed, but we were proud to have lions and leopard, cheetah, rhino, elephant, wildebeest, and kudu. South African game reserves were where most of the animals lived, and we knew that these were the best managed in Africa. I loved the people. I knew so many friendly and kind black people. Crime happened for sure, and there was discontent for sure, but it did nothing to remove that view. I love Joburg. It's a busy, dusty city, but it's exciting, and best of all for me, it is the home of Wits University. When I was old enough, enrolling at Wits was the highlight of my life. For one thing, there was a large number of male students. Coming from an all-girls high school, this was a big improvement. I loved walking the long corridors at Wits with their black doors and frosted glass windows, behind which I knew interesting things were happening. Wits was my place, where I studied and explored and became an adult, where I truly belonged. And we were white. That never bothered me. I was Jewish and South African and white. But those were the days of apartheid, when black South Africans got inferior rights to whites, inferior education, inferior everything, when they were required to carry a passbook and got put in prison if they left it at home. I have long memories of apartheid. My nanny Martha's children, best friends with me when we were little, but I learned to read and write. They barely did, and soon we did not play together. A memory of the police dragging away a black man on the street. His shoe came off, and my mother yelled at the police from our car, "Let him get his shoe," but they didn't. "He probably doesn't have any others," she said, and I felt so sad. We all knew that the apartheid government would fall. It was just a matter of when and how much bloodshed there would be. I canvassed for the opposition Progressive Party. It was very unsuccessful. We knew that the African Nationalist Congress, the ANC, was the party that would prevail, the party of Nelson Mandela, who would one day be freed from jail. Our parents were terrified that, like our grandparents, when the government changed, we would be persecuted and need to run for our lives. Leaving South Africa was raised as a topic with me, my brother and sister, and our cousins. Across South African Jews, leaving was the only topic. The leaving thing became a prize. My mother would say, "Oh, someone's son got a green card to America or emigrated to Australia." My sister went to the United States to study. My brother went to England. My cousins to Canada or Israel. The ambition of leaving was thrust on me, and I did not have the strength of character or the understanding to push it away. I married a Jewish doctor when I was 21, and we got a green card that allowed us to move to St. Louis. Amazing in retrospect. I had not considered what emigration meant. I did not understand that emigration basically means throwing away everything familiar and starting over somewhere strange, like America. I did not understand that our close family would be fragmented and would not be close ever again. I did not understand that belonging is a kind of tree. It grows all your life. From a little seedling, it deepens its roots to become a sturdy youngster, and then develops into a majestic tree that defines where you stand. When you emigrate, your belonging tree is yanked out of the ground. Maybe you can plant it somewhere else, but transplanting a tree is a delicate thing, and much of it may die before it can thrive again. I did not understand that my sense of belonging would disappear, and it would be a hard battle and many years before I could find it again. If I had understood all this, I would have thought very hard before leaving South Africa. I would likely have taken my chances with the new government and let my belonging tree keep growing in fertile, comfortable soil. I was so lost in St. Louis. I think I went into shock. I forgot about being Jewish, even. I divorced my husband, who seemed boring, and became really alone. I did not understand American humor or politics. The South African greeting is, "Hello, how are you?" And it's a question, and you answer, "Fine, how are you?" and wait for the answer. I could not get used to, "How are you?" as the greeting. It really bothered me. They had bears here and moose, no lions. The racial atmosphere was uncomfortable. In the meantime, South Africa was beginning to change in exciting ways, and I was 10,000 miles away, feeling lost. But actually, really, truth be told, some things in St. Louis were fine, and I knew it. I had been allowed to come into the United States, and that was a huge deal. I was truly grateful for the opportunity, and I would never want to be seen as anything other. In fact, I've never before given a talk about being lost in St. Louis. I had a place in a PhD program at Washington University, which is excellent, much better than Wits University in Joburg. Amazingly, they paid all my tuition and gave me a living stipend. I could not believe they did that generous thing. There were Nobel laureates at Washington U and a famous embryologist whose work I admired. Being in the program was an enormous honor. I started working really hard to make the most of it. And it turns out that universities are the same the world over. When I walked the corridors at Washington U, and when I sat at a lab bench or in a lecture, I could have been back at Wits, except for the American accents. The atmosphere of learning is the same at any university, and the smells of the chemicals are the same. It was pretty comforting and an anchor. At Washington U and beyond, universities became places of belonging for me. Now I travel the world, and even when I don't speak the language and students are learning in Chinese or Spanish, the feel of the university is the same. It is wonderful. It is a wonderful world of universities, and I belong there. I vaguely considered going back to South Africa, but two things changed that. I got a fantastic job at MIT, and I got married to an American and had lovely twin daughters, and then two more lovely daughters. What can one say about the honor of raising children and trying to become a successful professor at the same time? Help. I was so crazy busy for so many years, but that is another story. My kids taught me about America. There is no better way to understand the United States than to volunteer at your children's school. I volunteered for everything, and the mysteries of lockers became less so. The concept of the school cafeteria, the gym, basketball, Halloween, Thanksgiving, and July 4th all came into clearer view. Through my family, I discovered things I love about the northeastern United States. Here are my top 5. Number 1, blueberries. Number 2, chipmunks. They do not have either in South Africa. Number 3, snow. I am terrified of ice, but I think snow is wonderful. They don't have that in South Africa either. Number 4, Vermont. Those gorgeous green mountains where there is plenty of rain and the site of so many lovely family vacations. Number 5, voting. I get emotional when I exercise my democratic right to vote, even though I think US politics is as messed up as politics anywhere. Through my children also, I remembered about being Jewish. It started when the twins needed to go to a Jewish preschool, just like I had, and the idea of joining a shul gelled. In South Africa, we had looked down on reform shuls. In Newton, there were several Reform congregations, and they seemed quite mainstream. Rabbi Stern had just joined Temple Beth Avodah, and our family became part of the congregation more than 20 years ago. It took me a while to find my Jewish self again, because it was all about the kids at first. But at some point, I went to a regular Shabbat service, and as we said the Shema in unison, how we had in South Africa, how Jews did all over the world, there was huge emotion that welled up in me. Then the watershed, when Rabbi Lisa Iderson started an adult Hebrew class, and I joined. As a child, I had learned the Hebrew alphabet and a few words, but really I knew nothing. The class morphed into B'nai Mitzvah prep, and we were learning to chant Torah with Iris Sonnenschein. In our South African synagogue, women were not allowed to read Torah, and amazingly, here I was doing it. At our class, B'nai Mitzvah, going on 6 years ago, in my Devar Torah, I said that my Torah portion is about slavery, but for me, this portion is about freedom, the freedom of women to be equals in the Jewish religion. That had manifest for my 4 daughters on their benot mitzvah, no different from the boys. I think that the respect Reform Judaism has given women is one of the great steps in Jewish history. Today, I love lots of things at our temple: the familiar prayers, the high holidays, women putting on talesim, that we sing so much, thank you, Susan, Torah class, the women's retreat, helping out with social action. Through belonging to this congregation, I remembered that I love being Jewish. And what about Africa, you might ask? After I moved to the US, I didn't go back to South Africa much. It was expensive and weird when I got there. My mother insisted on referring to me as her daughter from America. I asked her not to. I'm from Joburg, Mom. But she kept right on. I had received the prize of a green card, and she was going to advertise it. My friends in South Africa were happy to have a coffee with me, but they were envious I'd been able to leave, and later they implied I'd abandoned our country. They were right. Some years after I became a US citizen and was honored to become a full professor at MIT, I started thinking, maybe, I thought, I could use the fantastic opportunities I had to reconnect with South Africa through work. So I started the MIT South Africa program. We ran entrepreneurship workshops and sent MIT students to do research at WITS. It turned out there were a number of MIT faculty from Africa who wanted to work back home too. So I expanded the program into the MIT Africa Initiative. The idea is not to help Africa, but to promote connections of mutual interest in research, education, and innovation. I place student interns all over the continent and focus on strategies in higher education, but the initiative spans all fields at MIT. From its grassroots start, the MIT Africa Initiative has become an official MIT unit. Our tagline is collaborating for impact. MIT Africa changed everything for me. I stopped going back to South Africa as a deserter and went back to work. It is very comfortable. But there was more because I started working in other African countries, and it counted that I was from South Africa and WITS. The first time a colleague at Makerere University in Uganda said about me in a meeting, "She understands, she's from Africa," my heart filled with joy. All this has renewed my connection with Africa. Some old dormant roots have woken up, and new little ones have appeared, roots of belonging in Africa. It took me a long time to understand slavery. I read Toni Morrison's books and the book Homegoing that my daughter gave me, and started to understand and wept at the long, abhorrent slave trade across the Atlantic and then across America, at the duplicitous Declaration of Independence that excluded Black people, at the oh-so-grudging way that Black people were oh-so-slowly given rights in a land where they had been forced to live. It is truly a waste of time to compare atrocities. But if I were to, I would place apartheid way lower on the scale of horrors than slavery. At least people kept their country, their families, and their communities. When I arrived in St. Louis, now decades ago, I don't blame that porter for spitting at me. I'm not your slave. I am so sorry about slavery and what has come after. I think any African American person has every right to be angry to this day. Last year, I was invited by the Black Students Union at MIT to come with on their 50th anniversary trip to Washington, D.C. I was incredibly honored, a white American African, that our Black students judged worthy of inclusion. We went to the extraordinary Museum of African American History and Culture. You start in the basement with the slave ships and weep. Then you ascend a long ramp that takes you up and up to the peaks of African American culture. That culture is fantastic, deep, and rich. It seems to me a statement on the strength and talent of African American people. In the beginning, I was Jewish, South African, and white. I am still Jewish, still white, but now a dedicated citizen of the US with roots in Africa. I am a mother full of love, and I am a citizen of the world of universities. That is a whole heap of belonging. My belonging tree is lopsided because it withered for many years before I could plant it again. Its roots are not so deep, but they get enough nourishment. My belonging tree is rooted in Newton and in Joburg, in Accra and Kampala, at MIT and Wits University. It's rooted with my children wherever they are. It's rooted in my Jewishness. My tree of belonging has healthy leaves, and it bears fruits that are filled with gratitude. Whatever difficult times there have been, I have had countless privileges and people to love. In his book, Sebastian Junger says that being part of a tribe is knowing people you would share your last food with. I know some of those people. That is incredibly lucky. So you see, this invitation to speak with you today is significant. It's more than 20 years since our family joined Temple Beth Avodah. It's a place where I belong, and I thank you all for that.
Things you could do is read Torah. So what a great honor. And I hope that, I know that there's so much food for thought there, but to think about each one of us, our individual trees and how they grow. Hazel, thank you so much for your story. I had an outline once on the table. Do you have an outline so I know how we're going to? I know we're concluding with the shofar service. That I know. There it is. Oh, good. We're on page 267. If you would please rise. Sorry? I'm going to call, Ben's going to. Second day. What do you usually play? Let's start on page 206, shall we? And Susan will lead us in the blessings for the sounding and the hearing of the shofar.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lishmoa kol shofar.
Amen.
Baruch. Did we do that yesterday?
Keep going.
Do it again.
I like that.
Atah. We can't have enough shechianus.
Exactly.
Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh.
Amen. Tekiah. Shivarim teruah. Tekiah. Tekiah. Shivarim. Tekiah. Tekiah, Teruah, Tekiah. On page 283, I know that poverty must cease. I know this through the brokenness and conflict in my heart. I know that protest is my most prophetic act, and that the world is longing for a new soul, a new healing moment. I know that when we awaken to our origins and become truly human, we bring hope to the children and to the earth. I feel called today to bring the people together to break the bread and tell the story. I feel called today to be a mystic in action, aligned to the dynamics of the universe. I feel called today to give my gift, to listen to the heartbeat of the broken world, to heal the fragmentation of people and planet. I feel called today to celebrate the wonder of creation and respond to sacredness and the challenges of life. I feel called today to participate in the work of my time, to fall in love, to feel at home. I feel called today to be inflamed with enduring hope, to be at one with the universe, to be touched by God. I feel called today to compose a new paragraph for life. Tekiah, Shivarim Teruah, Tekiah, Tekiah, Shivarim, Tekiah, Tekiah, Teruah, Tekiah Gedolah.
On page 285, Areshet Sifateinu Yerov Lefanecha Eharam Benisa. Areshet Sifateinu Yerov Lefanecha Eharam Benisa. Mevinu ma'asin mebidu ma'akshif lekol Tekiyateinu Uktabehel berachamim ufratzon seder shofratenu.
On page 286.
Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol, latei gedula liotzer breshit, shelo asanu kegoyei aratzot, velo samanu kemishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, vigor aleinu kechol hamonam, va'anachnu korim, u'mishachavim u'modim, Lifnei Melech Malchei Amlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu V'ne'emar V'haya Adonai L'melech al kol ha'aretz Bayom Mahu Yeh Adonai Echad U'shemo Echad.
For Yom Kippur, our focus is really so much centered on ourselves and our own individual soul struggle. Rosh Hashanah is about really being capaciously wide-armed to embrace not only those around us, but those who are no longer with us. Death is taken at this season and in years past. on Jewish holidays, those who are with us and no longer continue to occupy the place, even though the chair might be filled by somebody else. Their place is preserved forever. We think of all of them and for all of those who have been lost and are loved. On page 292. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei rabbah, B'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, B'chayichon v'yomechon v'chaye dechol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala v'zman kariv imru amen. Yehi shmei rabbah mevorach le'olam amei maya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, V'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shemei rekudsha b'richu, Le'ela u'le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata, Tushbachata v'nechemata, Ta'amiran v'yalma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shamaya, V'chayim aleinu v'el kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'imromav, Huya asei shalom, Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru. Amen. May the one who brings peace to the heavens bring peace to us, to all Israel, to all the world. And let us say Amen. And before we go into that downbeat, and while we're all standing, I'm looking at Becky and Lori, and I'm wondering, beyond reminding people, if you didn't get bags to take home to fill with food for those in need, and you didn't get your book, A Terrible Country, the book we'll be reading together as a congregation, and my guess, that's enough. I wish all of you, the sweetest, sweetest new year, filled with the possibilities of bringing together broken pieces, of making a sense of wholeness in our lives, looking forward, taking care to feed our roots, our tree may be beautiful, and that we might plant in our hearts, most of all, hope. Second day, sorry. So as we have the music, sorry, I missed a cue, which of course is that we have, my bad, Jamie, my bad. I always think, second day, we'll figure that out, and I never figure it out. Anyway, so luckily for all of us, we have lunch outside. And before we jump into lunch, it would be a good idea, I think, to do a couple brachot, because that's what we do. So first, over the wine, if you would please join me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen.
Amen.
Chaim. It's a cap. Okay, and of course, the round challah, the tradition of wholeness and completeness. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Amen.
And now, thanking Susan, thanking our maestro, thanking all of you. Shana Tova.
Hallelujah. 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 Hallelujah.